she was on ramp, and Ollie Sharpe said the people on ramp should a couple more so this chick wasn't there. What was her target? What was it?
Okay. Right, we're apparently live. Sorry, I did not realize we were live. Give us some, hit that like heart button if just to let us know that you can see us on screen right now, because from what I'm looking at, I can't see anyone, but hey, it wouldn't be a normal event if there wasn't some sort of technical hiccup. So hello and welcome to our very first Women of MEDDIC event. Today, I'm joined, as you can see, by 4 superb panelists, all with unique perspectives on the last 2 years. And we've all heard the terms about the last 2 years, right? Haven't we? We've heard unprecedented times, the new normal, and even learned some new words. If you were like me, I had never even heard the word furlough before. Panelists, have you heard of the word furlough before? No, it's a new word and now we all know it, right? And it also feels a little bit like we've lived a lifetime in the last 2 years, and yet it still also feels like it could be 2022, right? So what has all of this meant for sales? And more specifically, what has it meant for women in sales? Well, the data doesn't paint a particularly positive picture. In fact, according to research carried out by Deloitte Digital, nearly 70% of women said they've experienced adverse changes to their daily routines during the pandemic and believe these shifts have prevented or will prevent them from progressing their careers. And it's the topic of progression that is at the heart of why we created Women of MEDDIC. Our goal is to help all women in sales, but specifically to help women progress into revenue leadership roles. We're still putting all the finishing touches together on our community platform, which will be launching very soon. And if you're interested in getting on the waitlist, I think Jess or Beth is going to be posting a link to that waitlist in the chat below. And the chat is also the place to ask any questions. We're going to have a Q&A section at the end of the panel. So please ask your questions as and when they come to you. Jess and Beth will gather them up and we'll pass them over to us so we get to ask the awesome panel. So without further ado, let's get stuck into the main event. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to our panel today. I'm going to hand it over to them to introduce themselves. So Elizabeth, would you please start by introducing yourself?
Okay, hello everyone. Yes, so Elizabeth, I am a senior account executive with Brandmaker, and I entered this crazy world of sales back in March of 2015, and I remained with the same organization for 6 years, and I recently transitioned over last summer. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Laura.
Hello, everyone, wherever you're listening from. So yeah, I'm Laura, account executive, similar to Elizabeth. I've been in sales for probably about 10 or so years. I kind of lose count sometimes. I've had the chance to work at some pretty cool companies. I'm now at Amplitude, but I also worked alongside Lucy at MongoDB before.
Cool, thank you very much. Ollie, you're next on my screen as I'm going around. How are you doing? You're muted. Oh, wow, you did. Ollie, 2020. It's not 2020 anymore.
I thought you were taking us off. I thought you should put me on it. Oh, sorry, I'll start again.
This is not as high budget as Sales Loft events. You don't have people unmuting and muting.
No one does it for me. Okay. I'm Ollie Sharpe, VP of Revenue. Still don't know how to use mute. VP of Revenue here at Sales Loft. And I've been in sales, but you're not going to believe this because I look so young, but it's over 25 years.
Great. Thank you very much. And Lucy, are you ready with your mute button? There we go. Hey, Lucy, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. So I'm Lucy Williams-Jones, Director Enterprise Sales for UK and South Africa for Datadog. So I've been in sales for just over 22 years now. And as Laura said, we worked together at Mongo. I've also done a stint at BMC. And early on in my career, I did 14 years at Quest Software when monitoring was kind of, I guess, in its infancy. So yeah, nice to be here. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you to all of you for joining us today. So first question, I'm gonna come back to you, Elizabeth, with the first question, and it's a really open one, but it's how has the pandemic affected you as a salesperson and for the others as a sales leader?
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit, March 2020, yeah. I was wrapping up my last quarter at work because I was expecting our second child in July. And so for me, it was just like a race against time to just wrap up what I had to wrap up. But looking back, I was fortunate to kind of leave the workforce for a little bit. Wasn't particularly easy having a baby during the pandemic. So for me, because we were very isolated, we didn't, we stayed home. For me, I sought community. And so during my time away, I was craving that, connection, connecting with people, staying in touch with the business and the tech world, continuing to learn what I could. And so I just kind of mastered my craft. I started just researching and learning as much as I could. I discovered the Revenue Collective, which is now Pavilion, and that was a game changer for me. I met so many people. I started realizing that I had more of a mind for, all around go-to-market strategy and how my role in sales kind of played with the other parts of the business. And so for me, I went back after 9 months. And yeah, it was a big learning experience and a positive one for me. So I'd have to say that I'm grateful, right? You have to see the positive in everything, I feel, but it was a good time to do a lot of self-reflection and for me to really understand that sales was not some sort of pit stop on my way to another career step. It was something that I wanted to really become a practitioner in. This is something that I believe is a profession that should be respected and should be something that we work towards and not just something that, although we do get into it by accident most times, right? If you are committed and dedicated to that profession, then you can yield much from it. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. I think there are some really positive stories that have come out of the pandemic for sure. How about you, Laura? How have you felt that the pandemic's impacted you?
I just really like what Elizabeth said about community. I think that's actually something that really stuck out to me in what you shared, because although obviously it's impacted us in quite a lot of negative ways, I do think one of the positives was like the online community. I felt that during the last 2 years, I've definitely kind of lent into more of those communities on LinkedIn or other areas, and actually being able to connect more with women across like lots of areas around the world, so not necessarily like where I am. So I think that's been like a real positive. But you're right, it has, we've definitely kind of had to pivot in terms of like how we're selling, in terms of like how we're forecasting as well. It definitely has its challenges. And also I think the impact probably on how I'm thinking about my career as I move forward. I know, Elizabeth, you're like a mother. I don't know if this is the right question to ask, but I was interested in terms of like how you transitioned back into your sales role once you'd had a baby. Like, was that strange doing that during the pandemic? Like, how did that feel, not going into an office and not kind of meeting all the people that probably had joined since you've been away?
Yeah, so completely different experience. I had my first in 2017 and I took a whole year off, based in Canada. So really fortunate, we have really great parental policies in place, but totally different. But luckily, I always joke with my husband, like I gave him my last quarter. So I only took 9 months and I gave him the last 3 months of my leave. And for us to be together was really special. Like it gave me the time to focus, to get back into it, to wean myself away, not wean the baby because he was close to me, but just kind of get comfortable going back, kind of getting accustomed to all the changes and everything. And it was just, just being at home and being able to have everyone together was a lot better for my mental health in terms of that transition back. So yeah, that's
interesting. Yeah. How about you, Ollie? How has the pandemic impacted you? You're on mute again.
I'm just going to stay off mute. I keep turning myself off on mute. I'm just going to stay off it, right? I'm just in the office, so there's lots of noise outside, but I will stop doing that. For me, I think that there's been a lot of negatives to it, but I also think there's been a lot of positives. And I think that the way we sell, empathy has become more important. And I think a lot of things it's speeded up, such as the importance of culture, the importance of feeling and belonging and inclusivity within a team, but also the way we go to market with empathy and the way we understand the buyer's needs. Let's face it, it was moving in that direction. And I think it is just actually made it happen quicker and made it more important. And I think that's a good thing. It's sales is more now about trust. And there's so many things that are the traits that we see as female are the way that the sales industry has now moved into, which I think is a positive. And so I think that although there's negatives, I think there's some great positives.
I want to go a bit deeper there, because you're in quite a unique position here, Ollie, where, correct me the numbers on this, but I think over the course of the pandemic, your team has more than doubled in size. Am I right?
Slightly, yeah. We went from 10 to 80. So we went into the pandemic at the beginning with 10 people, and we were in a office for about 20. And then all of a sudden, when we came out of the first lockdown, we're at 40, and now we're at about 80. So yeah, it's grown. And a lot of people contacted me saying, how do we build culture now? Because we need culture. And to me, it was a little bit too late. That culture should have been at the priority right at the beginning around, and culture, including the diversity and inclusion side. And it's a bit too late to build it. Well, it's not too late to build it now, but luckily we concentrated on it right from the start, which I think put us in a good situation that we could hire. We've retained the culture now at 80 people, doubling again this year, and it's what we're sort of known for a little bit.
Yeah, that's very true. You only have to look on LinkedIn to see your team sort of encourage, it's always a good sign when you see people encouraging other people to join the company, particularly in a sort of a revenue focused team. But I'm going to press you a little bit more on that. What do you think it is that you've done well to maintain and build culture in a post-pandemic world?
I've got to be honest, it's just roll out the things I learned at LinkedIn. I spent 10 years at LinkedIn, and it's a priority there. It's culture. So I think that keeping connected with every individual, I think that it's we do have a hierarchy, but we're very flat in the way we talk to people, talk to each other. An SDR and a sales director, there's no difference in my eyes. And I think that having that, we also concentrate a lot on mental well-being. So every Wednesday still we have a 9 to 9:30, we have a full EMEA stand-up where we prioritize mental well-being. We do a gratitude exercise, some exercise that helps people look after themselves. This week we just cancelled it and said take half an hour to go do some exercise or whatever it is that you look for. And also, which I'm sure we'll come on to in the conversation, we're very considerate with people's times. I don't like putting meetings in at 9 p.m. where everyone has to be there, because we all have different priorities now and we have different work times, and we've carried that through. We've always said, when we started lockdown, we actually had 2 days off a month. Every other Friday we had a rest day. The whole company shut down so that everybody could actually look after their mental well-being. So I just think it's moving with the times and making sure we're looking after our people, which is what I enjoy doing.
Thank you, Ollie. That really.
Should I go on mute again now?
No, don't. Well, you can mute, but I'm just gonna have to keep reminding you. Lucy, last but no means least, how do you think the pandemic's impacted you?
So for me, as everyone I think has said, networking, community has been really important. But I entered the pandemic as an IC, as an AE at Datadog. And when I got really sick with COVID in the first kind of wave, I decided to move into leadership because of some of the things that I don't want to sell on my deathbed, but, I had an epiphany that, I've got 22 years working with some amazing, incredible people over that time. And I had so much knowledge, and actually I wanted to go and share that with others, because I thought, if anything does happen, I'm just going to have enterprise seller on my gravestone. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to go and take kind of what I'd learned, especially kind of building women in tech, bringing females up through the ranks, super, super important to me. I'm really passionate about it. So I flipped, actually, I took the positive. I flipped from being an IC into being a director and building a team, which again was really tricky because in lockdown, I think, Ollie, you mentioned it, hiring a team of individuals when you're seeing them through a camera and you can't go and build those relationships is actually really tricky. because, you know, we are just flat people behind a screen. So that's been really, really challenging, but I'm super excited. And, you know, I've built a really strong team who are, you know, I'm really enjoying that side and love working with them every day. But yeah, I try to take a bit of a positive out of it because, you know, there's lots happening in the world and, you know, we've all survived majority. So yeah, I took positive.
Yeah, well, I think I remember talking to you, you know, a little bit after you'd recovered, and I think we're so used to now with, you know, with different strains of COVID being generally more mild, but you know, you were really, I remember talking to you, you were very poorly, so I can see how that, you know, you would go through that sort of process, and it's like you say, as much as that was obviously horrible to be unwell like that, it's had a positive impact where you're now on a really cool path, I think, and you know, Datadog are just crushing it, which you love to see. You talked a little bit there, Lucy, about, you know, Zoom and that sort of thing. We seem to, I mean, we're on Zoom now, you know, broadcasting out on different social networks. We seem to spend all our lives on Zoom or WebEx or Teams or Google these days. How do you, this is sort of going a bit deeper on the question, but how do you feel about that? Do you feel like that is something that is here to stay? Do you feel like there's pros and cons to it? What's your thoughts?
I do. And if this was an in-person event, I probably wouldn't be there because I'm actually currently sat with a broken ankle. So tick that I could still attend behind the screen. I do. So I think I actually have seen the Zoom stuff being behind a camera quite positive. I think obviously there is some negatives, and I think it's harder to build relationships. And I think, you know, maybe Laura's going to talk about this a little bit, you know, further on in this conversation, but I see it as a positive. There's probably 3 or 4 things. So work-life balance, I think, has 100% become better. You know, you are in charge of your own diary. You can block out segments, but also you're not, you know, I'm 2 hours from London. I'm not commuting in for 2 hours each way there and back. So actually I can do other things like exercise, look after my mental well-being, like, you know, as Ollie said, but you can make time for yourself. I also think you have the ability to ultra prep. I talk to this about my team all the time, like before any customer interaction, like preparation is so important. And I think when you've got Zoom, you can obviously maybe have some additional notes that you wouldn't maybe if you were stood up in a meeting room in front of 20 people or 10 people presenting. So I think that's really helped with especially new reps who are coming in and ramping, because they've got that safety net where they're not going to know everything. They've been there 6 months, they're not an expert, but they've got that fallback that if they needed to quickly Google something or look at something on in our internal wiki or whatever, they have that ability. I think it means you can spend more time. You know, I was traveling away kind of 2 to 3 nights a week before, like pre-pandemic. My husband's great, but, you know, I never really saw him apart from weekends, and he's a wedding photographer, so he works weekends. So we were like ships in the night. So again, I think that's been really great for me, you know, being able to spend some more time at home. And I also think for confidence, I know a lot of people that I speak to, especially in kind of the female communities and stuff, really struggle with presenting. And, you know, I'll hold my hand up. I used to be terrified, as you know, Andy, you know, when we first started talking, right? I hated presenting, hated speaking in front of large audiences when I was in a room. And Laura knows this too, because we had this conversation at MongoDB kickoff. But I think having Zoom has made people become so much more confident in presenting, building their brand, and being able to actually really give a message. Because at the end of the day, I look like I'm just speaking to myself and 3 other people, and maybe I don't know how many people are watching, but not the hundreds or 10s or 50s that are actually there. So for me, it's really helped with confidence. And I think I've seen that through a lot of my team. They're much more confident right now because they're in that infancy of their career at Datadog with the screens. So I think it's a positive.
Interesting.
I would never want to go back full time, kind of face to face. I think there's a really nice reason for hybrid. And the other thing is, it's just come to me in a meeting, and we've all done them. We book meetings for an hour. You do the small talk in the lift on the way up there, and then you sit and do the meeting, and you're finished in about 40 minutes, but you feel you have to fill the hour. So then you might talk about something else, or you'll go and divert, and it can be a little bit awkward. I think now it's so easy just to kind of slack someone and say, can we jump on a quick Zoom for 10 minutes? I've got a really big question for you, especially at the end of quarter or end of month when we're closing. And it's so much easier to get their time by just jumping on a quick Zoom. You do the niceties, talk about the background, maybe the dog or the kids, you ask the question, and then you close off. And you wouldn't normally do that in a meeting, and you wouldn't be able to just get that FaceTime if everyone was back in offices, because everyone has lots more meetings when they're in offices.
Yeah, it's pros and cons. And on that point, actually, something you said just caught my interest there, where you were talking about having the ability to kind of plan better. because you're spending less time traveling, so you can put more time into preparation. Do you think, I think that's a very good point, but do you think there's a counterpoint there where our customers have maybe a little bit less patience for us as well, and they kind of expect us to be better prepared, and therefore there's almost like a double-edged sword there? If we arrive unprepared, we can't pull ourselves out of it as easily.
I do, and I think champions hate unprepared salespeople. I'm just going to take a quote from John McMahon's book, because I'm sure it was his, it might have been yours, but someone's book stated that champions hate unprepared salespeople. And I think now, if you do go in unprepared without a talk track or without a reason and deliberate outcome, I think that they would potentially think, I'm not going to work with this person, because it's such a competitive market in all of our spaces. You have to be at the top of your game, and you have to be prepared to be able to, articulate messaging, value. And again, I think Laura's probably going to, she's got a hand up. Laura's going to probably talk about this. But definitely, I think you have to be 100%.
Yeah, sorry, just I didn't want to jump in. It's always challenging. No, Lucy, so much of what you're saying is resonating with me. I definitely think, in terms of just going back to your point about being on a Zoom, and actually I think from my perspective, I always found it quite challenging, particularly if I was presenting to like all male audiences. I have like a fear of particularly more senior men, maybe in like C-level positions. I would just kind of crumble, whereas when I'm in front of a Zoom and a camera, I can feel quite large and important, and throw my voice a bit so that I sound probably more confident than I am. So I've really welcomed that. And also, like you said, like having those prepared questions, because I think, and this could be a statement that's maybe generalized, but I do think women are generally better at being prepared, as what I've noticed, particularly in our sales industry. But I think that it is challenging to maybe sometimes like build those relationships, like you said, Lucy, because you can't really get those snippets of information that you would normally get when you're, just going out of the meeting and you ask that quite maybe direct question about timeframes or budgets or something that can come across quite abrupt in a Zoom. So that's probably where I found it maybe a bit more challenging myself anyway.
Yeah, and is there any, because of that, and I think that's a very astute observation, that you don't have those opportunities, those opportunities to sort of be more informal, because it's almost like Zoom removes the sort of ability to be informal. It's very formal. Do you have any sort of tactics or strategies you've adopted, or way you adapted to kind of see that?
It's a good question, because it is really hard to sometimes be like, oh, do you have time for a Zoom? Because then someone has to look at their calendar, and generally I think people just block book a lot when they're working from home, or I do definitely. So I think just mobile numbers is honestly, you just need to get a mobile number as soon as you can and just give them off the cuff calls. People are probably more okay with you calling in the evening, because generally they're working into the evening as well, I found. But yeah, it's definitely really hard, I think. I don't know if Elizabeth, how you've managed to do it yourself.
Honestly, I think about like what is it? So we're in sales, regardless of the product or the solution that we're selling. Ultimately, I think it comes back to time, right? This notion of time as, it's a non-renewable resource. Like, it's not something that we can give back. But for me, it's more important than ever, especially now in the last couple of years, that maximizing the time that we do have, and not only for ourselves, but also for our prospects and our customers, right? So knowing that we're all competing for their attention, we know this, right? The fact is that there is so much digital noise and digital pollution out there that ultimately people think, I'm not going to respond to that. That's going to be a waste of my time. Or I'm not going to read this. This is going to be a waste of my time. So I think for us, it starts with valuing and respecting our time. And then in turn, we then make it easier to respect and value our customers' time. And I really do believe that.
Yeah. What do you think, Ollie? How are your team? Your team are pretty innovative at building champions and that type of thing. Is there anything you've seen that they're doing well?
I'm not sure about I think champion building has become more and more important, because I think that building the trust, like I mentioned earlier, but I think that now is like when Laura said about calling in the evening, if it's a cold call, I don't want calling in the evening. I'm like, literally, I will not even take the call, because I think that work-life balance has become more prominent, that we have to be more strict with ourselves. So I'm not sure about that side of it, but if someone's built me as a good champion and they have my trust and they call me in the evening, that's a completely different thing. So I do think that champion building has become even more important, and it's harder to do, but I think that shows that we have to spend more time at it. We have to put more effort into it, because we can't take them for lunch. We can't go for a quick drink after the meeting or anything like that. So how you come across, it's like interviewing someone over Zoom. It's completely different as well. So the importance of building that relationship, trust, showing empathy is so much more important now than it's ever been, just because of the situation.
Yeah, indeed. I felt like champion building almost used to start with a relationship and then you'd be able to show the value, but now it's almost like you have to start with a value to build the relationship. And I think that's something we're seeing more and more. But again, going back to the thing with being on Zoom all the time, it's harder to do. And I think it's going to be a great leveler. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for those who can really kind of show their strengths to kind of lean into that. But on the Zoom thing, one thing that I know is a really interesting topic, and it was actually, when we were having our preparation calls leading up to organizing this event, it was a topic that kind of really helped us shape the direction of what we wanted to talk about. It was around this kind of being on Zoom all the time and some of the challenges that came with that. And I think some of what I heard from you, all of you, really resonated with me, of some like, oh, it's not just me that feels like that way. And I think, like, Elizabeth, you really articulated some of these things, like to the point where even in our small group, when you started talking about it, I think everyone was like, oh, it's not just me. And I'd love you to share some of those sort of things we talked about a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and Laura, this came up, right? You had mentioned this historically, and this is changing, but it's changing way too slowly, is like, the value that is placed on women often comes from the physical, right? The aesthetic, and for a lot of, even for myself, when I think about a really important meeting, or, I want to really put my best face on, literally and not, is that, these things take time, right? Like it's a time commitment to sit there and prepare yourself for the day so that you're camera ready and you're confident enough to go there. But there's also times when I don't have the time for it, and it's okay too, right? So the thing with being on video, and a lot of the things that I did this year specifically, was do a lot more experimentation with video messaging and that kind of that asynchronous messaging, right? Follow up with an email. No, let's create a video and do that instead, right? And so I think the more we can kind of normalize that, it doesn't have to be this whole process to be able to achieve one thing, like create a video. For me, it's like I'm more confident knowing that I have value to communicate what types of, solutions I'm addressing, what challenges I'm addressing for my customers. I think that takes precedence over saying, oh, my hair wasn't, I didn't wash my hair yesterday, or I didn't straighten my hair, or I haven't applied foundation, etc. Yeah, and I think that that's one piece of it where we're not very level, because a lot of male counterparts can just go throw on a shirt, whatever, a collared shirt, and they're good to go, right? They're in business. And so yeah, I think that being able to see more women do that, and just have more women say, yeah, that's cool, like I can do that. I don't have to be so concerned that maybe I don't look great enough to be on a video, or etc. So yeah.
I totally, I mean, I relate. I think this is one of those things that I think more people will relate to than what people perhaps realized, because I think, like, people will see salespeople putting videos out, doing video outreach, all that kind of stuff, and they'll think, oh, everyone's doing it, they must just flick record and off we go. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. Ollie, your team does a lot of video, right?
Yes, they do. They use video every single day. Constantly. And some of my team, I've heard some of my team saying, I do my videos, some of the females in the team saying I do my videos in a block because I have to look good, I have to do that. But honestly, what I think is good is that people are talking about this, and it's just like talking about anything. As soon as people start talking about mental well-being and stuff like that, I think that the fact that there's females talking about that's how they feel, then hopefully some of the male leaders that weren't aware of this before will be a little bit more empathetic when they're thinking about, okay, let's go over Zoom, or how many videos have you done? Talking about it is a very good thing, because I was aware of it, but when we had the conversation the other day, I thought, am I aware enough? When I'm talking to my team, we're saying, right, we'll do a Zoom, or how many videos have you done this morning, or anything like that. We should be thinking twice about asking those questions, because we don't really think in that way. So it's good that there's the conversation about it.
Yeah. And I wanted to add one thing, because no, you just don't press record and off you go. The few times that I've done it, it's great. It feels great. But there's been times I'm trying to record a video and I'm like doing 7, 8, 9 takes. And I think that a part of it is that I want it to be perfect. I want it to be, check all the boxes. But in fact, it's like, it's good. It's good enough. Do it. People know that even the person who's receiving the video probably knows that they've recorded themselves too on a video and stammered, or a lot of those filler words. Yeah, we're human, right? It happens. And I think that the great thing about, the virtual work reality and being able to sell in this virtual environment is that it's humanized us. Right?
You can laugh,
yes,
you can laugh at the mistake.
Yeah, we're behind a screen, but like we're people, we're humans, and we get flustered and we get stressed, and our mind are thinking in 10 different directions. So yeah, I think that's don't let perfect get in the way. I think
I like that. And you talked a bit there about the person receiving the video being the customer. And I think that's something we should probably talk about a little bit as well, is the customer. Like, we've talked a lot about how selling has changed for us, but how do you think, Laura, how do you think that the buying process has changed for customers? Is there anything like we should think about more when we're selling in this new world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think customers are probably, we always know that they're doing a lot of research before they come to us, right? I think that's true, but I probably think more than ever, just because they're not networking in the same way, or maybe they're networking in digital platforms instead. But because through the pandemic, people couldn't just meet up for drinks and then get told, oh, you should, try this technology. This is what we've been doing. I think the way that I've found a lot of my customers are buying now, it's like doing a lot more online research themselves. And then as well, I think it's because we're able to be more digital, they're involving a lot more stakeholders. I always know that there's so many buyers in a process anyway, where that one person doesn't make the decision. But if anything, I think there's so many more stakeholders. I was asked the other day to invite about 30 people onto a pilot, and he was like, we just want to open it up to everyone just because they can. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is not good. So yeah, I definitely think that they're probably throwing our own sales process off a little bit. And it's something that we need to accommodate and be creative around how we handle.
Yeah. What do you think, Lucy? Do you concur with Laura?
I do, absolutely. So we follow quite a rigid playbook at Datadog, which we, a lot of other tech companies use, Mongo, BMC, etc. And what I've found actually, or my team have found, is that now that we're in this new virtual world, that the customers try and take you away from what is the playbook, whether that be, skipping stages, trying to, when you do a discovery call, for example, I think one-to-one discovery is really important, because if you have 3, 4, 5, 6 people on them, it then can turn into an open discussion, and everyone's got different requirements. Everyone's got different success criteria or needs, and it can be an absolute car crash. But they think it's acceptable because you've sent the calendar invite, and then suddenly the invite has gone out to 20 other people, and everyone joins this discovery call when you're expecting, you've got your prep, you've got your list of questions, and then you've got all sorts on that call. So no, I think it definitely has changed the way that we have to communicate. And I think you have to be quite firm actually with kind of the process and the stages of the process, because otherwise it could be completely deviated and it ended up a complete car crash.
That's fascinating to me, the amount of more people turning up to discovery calls, and you actually sort of, because I think when I first hear that, I think, well, the more the merrier, shortly more information, but you're right, you're losing kind of the, not control, but you're losing the sort of focus. And so what do you do in those situations if you someone in your team's got a discovery call booked in, and all of a sudden you see X person is accepted, filling up the invite? What's your advice?
So my advice to the team would be, go back to the person you booked it with, explain the purpose of the call and what the agenda is. It is around understanding, have we got a match? Is it worth having a conversation to take it through? It's super important. If they feel that they just want to hear more about Datadog, of course we can do that, but it wouldn't be a discovery call. It would be, this is what Datadog does, this is the challenges it fixes, and this is like the main areas where Datadog could potentially be used, and then off the back of that, book some deeper dive discovery calls from that. But as I've sat on both, I think one-to-one definitely works better. You can maybe get away with 1 to 2. But the other thing is, when people forward on calendar invites nowadays, even in that next step, which is that new business meeting, unless you've done your research on every single person that's going to be looking at that, you could have enemies walking into the room. You could have champions of competitors walking into that room. And again, that completely can throw your sales process, your meeting, your demo. There's curveballs, and we all like to be prepared, and that can absolutely floor that preparation that you've spent 2-3 hours doing to make sure that's a great experience. Because at the end of the day, it's all about giving value to the customer. It's not about kind of what we want. It's right, what can we give and deliver that's going to make them successful in the role they have. So that has been a big challenge, I think, and I'm sure Ollie, Elizabeth, I think we've all seen it. I think if you asked every single person on this call, we've all had those challenges over the last 2 years.
Yeah. What do you think, Elizabeth?
Sorry, Laura, you had your hand up first.
Oh.
Sorry. So I totally agree. And the thing is that, especially when you're running more enterprise level sales cycles, you're moving away from that transactional. So, there's no value at the very beginning stages of trying to bring all these different folks together, cross-functional stakeholders. Because again, depending on who's in the room, right? And we are talking about gender dynamics. If there's a woman and there's a man, maybe the woman wants to be able to tell Lucy something that she knows that is a challenge in their current state, and maybe doesn't feel comfortable articulating or communicating that to her in that moment. And so for us to be able to really take that customized approach, that one-on-one, and then one to few, and then kind of connect those dots, and then when the time is right, bring those different stakeholders together. The one thing I wanted to say, just in terms of how I feel the buyer and customer experience has shifted, in a positive way, of course, from the pandemic, going back to this notion of community, right? Yesterday I had the opportunity to meet with my first stakeholder of an organization that I've been learning about and researching and kind of taking my time. As most of these folks come in, they've researched, they've asked peers, I have this problem, what kind of solutions are you using for this? And, she came in as a demo request. And I always now make sure I ask, what brought you to us? How did you come to hear about us? And she specifically said, I was talking to my peers in my community, and I was explaining my problem, my challenge, and your company's name came up. And I said, great. And so now we see a lot of organizations are starting to step up and understand that community building is really critical. And the way we can approach and engage our prospects and customers are going to be through customer advocates, right? The people that have been through those challenges, have come out on the other side, and can confidently say, I recommend you look at this, or, and so I think we have to put a lot more weight on the power of our customer. And of course, we know it's customer centric first. We all know that keeping customers, retaining customers in terms of revenue is much better than, your net new acquisition, right? So a real focus and shifting on not only bringing on new customers, but keeping those customers happy and engaged, and collaborating with them on how they can approach different segments or different channels, ultimately solving a problem that persists across their domains, right? So I think that I like that I'm seeing that a lot more organizations doing that, but again, a lot of work to be done for sure.
Yeah, for sure. One thing we've talked a lot about is champion building, and we've been talking in the context of our customers. But one of the things that came out in a lot of the research that we were reading ahead of this was that one of the challenges that's happening by not being in the office so much is you miss out on those spontaneous opportunities to meet people you wouldn't normally necessarily meet, those people you may spark relationships with, who can then sometimes they actually may be people that help you out in your career, and they become almost sort of career champions. We feel like we've lost those a little bit. How do you, open question to the panel, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like that's something that you can try and lean into, or is there any advice you'd give for the audience on that topic?
If I can say, I think there's an increased need for mentorship and networking within an organization, because we're not doing that. And I know that it's like as leaders, we've got to make sure that being in the office isn't like a status symbol, and we don't judge that when we look at promotion, because you can't think like that anymore. So I definitely, we need to think about how we actually keep not just the collaboration and the bonding, but how do you meet people that you wouldn't normally meet? And I think there's, in the research that you talked about earlier, it shows the increased need for mentoring. And I think that's a good thing, because you don't have the opportunity to just do it off the cuff anymore. So yeah, I think we should do that as individuals and seek it, seek out the mentorship.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's has a big impact, right? Who you build relationships with in kind of like your immediate circle of who you're working with day to day. And I've definitely noticed from working at Amplitude, like we didn't see each other because we've only just come back into the office. And there were certainly some people that now I've gotten to know, and you kind of want to, particularly like the younger women, I feel like a real responsibility that I want to help them have that connection. But there needs to be more in place. Like I'm one person. So it does baffle me sometimes that organizations don't really have enough of like a internal mentorship program. I know there's lots of great communities like this, but I think it's quite challenging to kind of set that up. So I don't know if anyone has a perspective on where that's been done well, because I'd love to hear about it.
Lucy, do they do anything like that at Datadog?
They do. So we have just this year started building out the community guilds. So we have 5 of them. And one of them is Women and Non-Binary of Datadog. I'm actually the co-lead of that. So we are starting to build out mentorship programs within the community, within those guilds, and also within sales specifically, so women of sales. So what we're trying to do is bring women together who have the challenges, because what we see, and I think it's common, I think we actually spoke about this when we were doing the prep last week, is a lot of females go into an SDR role or a BDR role, and then they never really make it into that enterprise space. They either move into customer success or marketing or other areas, or they get to commercial, then they never make it that final jump. And I do think there's probably a number of reasons for that, which is probably for a completely different conversation. But mentorship is so important, especially when you are a smaller diverse group in typically a lot of guys. 100%, I totally support it. And I'm a mentor to a couple of young females who are literally just starting out their career, BDRs who have been selling for 6-7 months, the hardest job in the world, really. Hats off to all those people that have that challenge of picking up the phone every day, and that's all they do. So no, it's super important, and it's something that I'm really passionate about.
I love that. Elizabeth, have your hand up, and we're going to go over to Q&A after this.
Yeah. So I spent my first, before I joined my Ceridian, the company I stayed with for 6 years, I was a recruiter. And moving to Ceridian, I knew who I would sell to, which was HR and culture people. And, or the human capital management space, in terms of understanding that, these themes of customer employee engagement and retention and career development, right? Like, yes, we were there, we were having these conversations, but it wasn't until the pandemic hit and now the great resignation that everyone was focused on how do we bring on new talent when we should have been thinking about how do we keep the people with our organizations? How do we foster their career growth? How do we have conversations with them earlier on to say, you know, you obviously have these strengths. You obviously are interested in these types of things. You ask questions. Would you potentially be willing to consider another role? And then for managers and leaders to come together to say, how can we make this possible? Right. And case in point, I had my weekly one-on-one with my manager yesterday, and she asked me straight up, she's like, you're smart. I know. And I can't be selfish thinking that you're going to be in this role for the next 5 years. So let's start talking about what we can do, how I can support you in your next career path forward. And that's what needs to happen more leaders. And I told her, you know what, I'm caught off guard because if you're in sales, you're an individual contributor and you're a performer. It's almost like we want you to stay here, right? We want you to stay in this role because you're just so good at sales. And so what I can do is mentor, what I can do is coach, you know, folks that want to move into my role so then I can leave that role vacant and then move on to where I can make a bigger impact. And I feel that's like a mindset that is going to be of value moving forward. A lot of organizations now are struggling to fill the roles that they have open. And I think it was a reactive thing where it was like, well, we just need these people, when it should have been proactively thought about how can we build these employees and kind of offer them opportunities in other realms or other domains of the company. So, you know, that I think is very critical to keeping really happy employees. And mentorship and sponsorship is going to be very key for that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. All right, well, I'm going to jump into some Q&A now. So first question we've had through is around pipeline generation. I think we talked a little bit about video, but I would love to hear from the panel, like, what things are you doing to generate pipeline now where, you know, everyone's kind of back to back and all this kind of thing? Is there anything that's working, that's standing out for you guys? You want to share any of your secrets? Ollie says no.
I'm joking. I am joking. To me, it's more about just how you stand out. I wouldn't say it's any secrets. I think that standing out from the crowd is more important now than it's ever been, because we just fed up of scrolling. We're fed up of being at a computer. So I get cold called a lot or reached out to a lot, and the bar is higher than it used to be. So increased personalization, better videos that they're sending out to me. They've got to stand out a lot more. And they've also, one thing I appreciate and is someone that's just direct and to the point. If someone literally says, I'm interested in selling you my product, this is what it does, I'd much rather that than have to go back back and forth 4 or 5 times. I feel like I'm wasting time. And I'd rather just go, no, this isn't me, sorry, I'm not interested, than actually go back and forth. So personalization, stand out, and just be open and honest and don't waste anybody's time is what I think.
I didn't see who put their hand up first, so I don't want to get in trouble.
It was Elizabeth.
Yeah. So the one thing I noticed coming into this new organization was that a lot of the opportunities we were coming across was word of mouth. And so when we think about the time and the commitment it takes to build champions and really build our rapport, I think what we're doing now is we're trying to focus more on like referrals and going back to those champions and understanding that they are communicating with their peers in different communities and different platforms. And so we don't do enough of that, right? Sales in general, I feel we don't really leverage that referral, the ask, probably because we don't do it well. So it's really more about like, how can you be more tactical, more strategic about, how are you making that referral? And of course, like making it, giving some value back to that customer, right? So obviously, we're not, I'm not talking about like, transactionally or buying a referral, but like to be able to show your appreciation and your gratitude and like maybe send them something, because I know I've been receiving a bunch of different swag boxes and makes me pretty happy when I receive something in the mail and it's a box of something really nice and beautiful and things that I like because they know me. It makes me happy. So I think building pipeline moving forward is going to be a lot about how do we leverage our existing champions, referrals, and existing customers.
I love that. Yeah, it becomes like, you think, I'm really passionate about it, like that flywheel effect, right? Your prospects of today become your customers of tomorrow because you follow through on all the value you've promised to them very specifically. Laura.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with all of that. I think something that I've been doing as well, because of the pandemic, meaning everyone was all digital, I've definitely noticed that people want to build their digital persona online. So any way that I can help potential prospects or even existing customers do that, I feel like that's worked really well. So whether it's kind of through my network, getting them to speak at certain events or take part in things that they're interested in, just building a relationship that's not about me trying to sell them something, but actually build a relationship around something that they care about. So like I'm very invested in women in tech, so I use that quite a lot as well from a genuine interest. And then other forms, I luckily get to sell to product people and they genuinely like kind of talking about their products and posting things. So it works quite well. But I think, yeah, boosting someone's digital presence is a good way.
That's good. That's good. Lucy, did you have your hand up again, or is it?
No, I would just add to it. I think I totally agree with everything that Elizabeth and Laura said. But one thing, we prep for a meeting and we put so much prep because we are there and we are presenting. I think, pre-pandemic, people really prepare, research, and actually look at the outreaches that they were sending to customers, hoping that they would get an answer. And I think the answer is no, right? I think over the last 2 years, you have to be so specific in what your outreach is because everyone's doing it. So, at Datadog, we put a lot of effort and time into researching the company through, reports, what's important to that person before we actually send a very, very tailored outreach as that first touch. And it has worked. But I think, pre-pandemic, you could just send anything, hoping you'd get it. You'd ring the switchboards. No one's there anymore at the switchboards. Can't really get mobile numbers. Can't really ask for personal addresses to send out swag, as Elizabeth said, right? And you can't really send it to offices because for 2 years no one got it. So you do have to make yourself stand out and really differentiate yourself from others. And I think that first outreach is so important because it actually sets the scene for the engagement for the rest of that sales process.
Yeah, I love it. Right.
And before you on that note, Andy, why, if you are an organization that has a sales development organization, that is critical because those folks are your first line of defense. Those are the folks that are going to be making that first contact and that first impression. So obviously that's another session, just talking about like how critical SDR teams are to our success, right, in sales. And so
Spot on. Right. Last question, and it's a quick fire question that came through the chat because I've just realized that there's like a few minute lag. So if we want to finish on time to not let people miss their next meeting, we've got to wrap it up now. So the question is a quick one. We've talked a lot about sending video. The quick fire answer is, where's the best place to send the video you've recorded to prospects? I'll start with you, Lucy.
So I don't do that many videos anymore, but I probably would do it via LinkedIn video if I was going to do one, or maybe via Zoom video, record it and send it, because the format is sometimes, I don't know how I feel about sending direct LinkedIn videos. Actually, I get them a lot from recruiters. Sorry, Ollie, I don't mind them, but I think that they can be a little bit invasive. So yeah, I would probably try and do it on a Zoom, record it and send it if I was going to do that. We don't use any of the kind of video tools at Datadog right now. So yeah, we have to be a little bit creative.
Okay, thank you. Ollie, quick answer. Where do you use send video?
You'd obviously need a good sales engagement platform to use it, but put it into step 3 using something like Vidyard. I can't talk about that, but yeah, something to Vidyard over email.
Cool, thank you. Laura?
Yeah, same Vidyard over email, but make sure I put like a sign up so that it has a written personal message so that they know it's not like a bot or something, so that it's
Right.
more personal.
Just make sure you've wiped the last person's name. I've had a few
Yeah,
of those.
exactly. Wiped it all out.
Zero effort to wipe off the person's full name. What do you think, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think obviously there's other alternatives to Vidyard, but I think it's more about not just having it once. Like you send a video maybe through a Vidyard, it's personalized, you send it through email, and then you do that kind of that omni touch, right? Like so you're, or maybe you send the Vidyard through a LinkedIn note, right? And maybe you have a little voice note as a follow-up saying, hi, I'd really love for you to watch this. Make sure you watch it until whatever minute, 1:05, etc. To kind of get them curious. But yeah, it's all about the multi-touch.
I think the follow-up's super important. I'm going to have to wrap it up there because we are right on time, and I think like there's even a little bit of lag. So sorry if this is dragging over the hour mark for everyone. But in closing, I want to thank our panel for their awesome insights. Elizabeth, Laura, Lucy, and Ollie, thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Jess and Ellie for setting this up and for all their help in getting it organized. And of course, I want to thank you, the audience, for tuning in here. It was brilliant to see so much diversity in the RSVP list, and even also in terms of the seniority of people starting their careers in sales. There's been some VPs and even some C-level people tuning in today. So thank you so much for that. Like I said before, we're going to be launching the group very soon. There should be a link in the chat that you can put your name on the waiting list to get first to find out about that. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and until the next time, may your champions be strong. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.